Love. We've all felt it. It's this incredible force that's inspired poems, started wars, and, let's be honest, driven us all a little crazy at some point. But what is it really? Is it just a chemical cocktail in our brains, a story we're told, or a choice we make? Well, in this explainer, we're going to try and deconstruct one of the most powerful and complicated experiences we humans have.
You know that feeling, right? That first stage of falling for someone where everything feels all-consuming? A little irrational, a little wild. It's a feeling so universal, you have to wonder, is there something real behind this so-called madness?
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The ancient Greeks actually had a word for this exact feeling, mania. They saw it as this kind of divine, uncontrollable passion. Now, fast forward a couple thousand years, and what do neurobiologists see when they scan the brain of someone newly in love? They call it frontal cortex deactivation. In other words, the part of your brain responsible for judgment literally goes quiet. It's amazing. The ancients felt it, and now we can actually see it happening.
Okay, so let's start right there, with the biology. Because that overwhelming head-over-heels feeling, it's not just in your head. It is a full-blown chemical storm that's raging through your entire system.
It's really this perfect storm of three key chemicals. First, your brain gets a huge flood of dopamine. That's the reward chemical, the one that gives you that incredible high, that euphoria. Then, noradrenaline kicks in, and that sharpens your focus so much that this one person becomes the absolute center of your universe. And then, and this is the wild part, your serotonin levels actually drop. Now, low serotonin is linked to obsessive-compulsive behaviors, which is exactly why you can't stop thinking about them. It's the brain's own recipe for obsession.
So when you put it all together, what do you get? This chemical cocktail basically hijacks your brain. Your reward system is firing on all cylinders, while your judgment center, your frontal cortex, has pretty much checked out for a little vacation. This isn't just a nice metaphor, it's a real neurological state, and it perfectly explains why we sometimes ignore all the red flags when we're falling in love.
But you know, long before we could map out brain chemistry, people were trying to make sense of this crazy, powerful force. And they did it the best way they knew how, through stories, through myths. These were our first attempts to code these biological drives into our culture.
And if you look at our earliest myths, you basically see two big ideas about love. On one side, you've got the Sumerian goddess Inanna. For her, love is this huge cosmic force that keeps society running. It's about fertility, social order, making sure the crops grow. It's love as a source of stability. And then you have the Greek god Eros. He is pure, chaotic, individual desire. The poet Hesiod said he's the one who unbinds the limbs and steals the reason. This is love as a wild, personal passion that can, and often does, cause a lot of trouble.
And don't think for a second that these ancient myths are just dead stories. The cultural DNA of a figure like Inanna is incredibly powerful. Some of her marriage rituals are still practiced in parts of the world 6,000 years later. And her whole archetype, this powerful woman whose love leads to tragic world-changing events, you see her again and again in heroines from Layla in Eastern poetry all the way to Shakespeare's Juliet. This line from the poet Fuzuli is just beautiful, and it captures this really profound shift in thinking. Suddenly, the pain of love isn't something to be fixed, it's something to be cherished. This signals a turn where love becomes less of an external force that happens to you and more of an internal, spiritual journey. It's the perfect doorway into the world of literature.
Right? So literature is where these big, abstract ideas, biology, myth, get a human face. It's where we get to see the real ecstasy and the real tragedy of love playing out in the lives of characters we'll never forget.
And here again, we see those two major paths emerge. In Sufi poetry, for instance, earthly love is treated like a practice run. It's a way to prepare for the ultimate love, a divine connection with God. The whole point is to dissolve your own ego into something much larger. But then you have the great tragic novels, like Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. Here, love is a collision course. Anna's intense personal passion for Vronsky slams right into the rigid rules of her marriage and her society. And the result is, well, it's total destruction. So ultimately, what these great stories are all about is this fundamental tension, this epic battle. It's that raw biological drive, our passion, crashing head-on into society's need for structure and rules, or commitment. And believe it or not, this very conflict perfectly sets up how modern psychology understands love.
Okay, so we've got the biological storm and the cultural stories.
But how do we actually build a bond? How does that chaotic, crazy passion turn into something stable and lasting? Or why does it sometimes fail? Well, let's look at the psychology and chemistry of it all.
So, the psychologist Robert Sternberg came up with this brilliant idea that love has three main ingredients. The first one is intimacy. Now, this isn't just about the physical stuff. This is the emotional core. It's that warm feeling of being truly seen, of being understood, of sharing your deepest self with someone and feeling totally connected.
The second ingredient is passion. And this is exactly what we were talking about at the beginning, that biological storm. It's the dopamine rush, the romance, the physical attraction. It's that can't keep your hands off each other energy that really fuels the early days of a relationship.
And the final piece of the puzzle is commitment. This is the thinking part of love. It's the conscious decision to say, I'm with you, and, just as importantly, it's the long-term choice to stick with that decision, to maintain that love through all the ups and downs. This is the in sickness and in health part of the deal. What's so cool is how these three ingredients can mix and match to create all the different kinds of love we experience. You combine intimacy and passion, and you get romantic love. You take intimacy and commitment, and you have companionate love, that deep, comfortable friendship you see in so many long-term couples. But the gold standard in this theory is consummate love, where you have all three working together in a beautiful balance.
And just like there's a chemistry for falling in love, there's a totally different chemistry for staying in love. As that initial dopamine storm starts to calm down, a new chemical crew takes over. You've got oxytocin, the famous cuddle hormone, which builds trust and that deep feeling of affection. And then there's vasopressin, which helps promote that long-term monogamous bond you need for a real partnership.
So we have the biology, the myths, the psychology, but there's one last really crucial piece to this puzzle. Let's pull all these threads together now and start to see love not as a state you just fall into, but as this dynamic, ongoing process that you actually build. But why is it that some people can build that lasting bond so easily while others really struggle? Well, a big part of the answer is in our own personal history. We don't come into relationships as a blank slate. Our ability to connect is deeply shaped by our earliest experiences, which form what psychologists call our attachment style. Now, very broadly speaking, there are three main styles. People with a secure style tend to trust others easily and aren't too worried about being abandoned. Then you have the anxious style, where people often fear rejection and need a lot of reassurance. And finally, there's the avoidance style, where people can be uncomfortable with too much intimacy and really value their independence. These patterns, which we learn as kids, kind of become our default blueprint for relationships as adults. But here's the important part. That blueprint is not set in stone. Just understanding your style is the first huge step toward changing it.
When you really look at it, love is never just one thing. It's this constant, dynamic journey. It's a process that starts with an involuntary biological storm, gets filtered through all the cultural stories we've been told, and is navigated using the psychological maps from our past. The real challenge, and the real beauty of it, is moving toward a conscious partnership, where we actively build something meaningful on top of that very complex foundation.
And that kind of leaves us with a final big question to think about. If love begins as this uncontrollable force of nature, this biological storm, then maybe the true work and the true art of a lasting relationship is the conscious, deliberate act of taking all that raw energy and shaping it into something beautiful.